Good morning, everybody. I was just sauntering around the room because if you look at Tanya and I today, it is polka dot day. And here we have polka dots in a bag, but we could widen it to pattern day because I noticed a lot of stripes, a lot of patterns today. So I'm glad you got the message. Um, I don't know. No pattern here. Here we have nice patterns. So, so we're here for the last session at this institute about coaching pathways, and again, I'm thrilled to see these tables full. So not too much drop off. Uh, what would you do at 8 o'clock in the morning in Traverse City, right? There's probably a lot to do, right? But we lock the doors so you can't get up. Uh, so, I just wanted to. Yesterday we talked about, we need a resource page for all of our things and stuff. And somebody said, it's already there. But I don't always read carefully all my emails. So Melissa Weirenga is here. She's been working with the people on Zoom. And she's going to just remind us where that resource is, and also she developed the final reflection, so she's going to just talk about that either now or toward the end, but that's great, whatever.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lallier. On the agenda, there is a link to a landing page for all the breakouts, and that's linked on day 1 for the agenda. If you click on that, it'll have another link that says resources shared under our breakout title. That will take you to a landing page, and that has everything linked that we have discussed thus far or have been shared. You will find the day 3 reflection form on there as well. There are a couple of questions on there, but we do ask for you to wait till the end to fill that out so you have today's learning, and that will guide where the pathway will head through the quarterly in October. So if you want to add to that page, please feel free. I've also linked a few of the resources that were shared from online participants. And there's a folder link in there too. So please feel free to use that. It is a resource for this entire pathway for the year.
Thanks for getting it all set up for us. It's going to be very helpful as we continue adding to our ideas. So on day 1, we looked at how are we introducing coaching cycles to teachers. And some of our questions, actually, we answered some of your questions, I hope, when you said, how do we launch coaching cycles with teachers? How do we explain them to teachers? So that was some questions that were answered, we hope. Then yesterday we spent a lot of time looking at the elements of coaching cycles and some of the difficulties. And again, that answered some of the questions that people had. Resources, people want to know what resources are. Yesterday when we went through, we reminded you of all the templates for co-teaching, modeling, observing, goal setting that you might use, tweak, revise, however you want to do that. And as well as we captured, a lot of you are using Diane Sweeney's book about student-centered coaching. Jim Knight's The Impact Cycle. Some of you said a really good resource were going through the modules on the coaching essentials, which sometimes we forget to mention. And I think a couple more have been added, but we can have a part on the resource folder of possible other books or things that you'd want. I noticed nobody has listed Dr. Bean and J.C. Ippolito's book called Coaching Mindsets, which I think is really good. And so I'll probably add that to the list. So we've answered hopefully some of your questions, but there's a lot of questions left to answer. We'll save some of them for October. We're not going to go through them all today. But one of the questions that was pretty frequent up there was, what do you do at the end of the coaching cycle? And so, we've been doing these article excerpt studies. And by the time we finish, I think you will have read almost everything in the Reading Teacher article. But so Suzy's going to fast forward. So what happens after a coaching cycle? There is an excerpt on pages 203 and 204 that we would like you to read and think about which of these maybe have you already done at the end of a coaching cycle and which seem feasible for you. So it's just kind of a like, okay, I could do this or this or this or this. Which of these resonate the most with you? So we're going to give you about, it's actually it's about 1 page of reading. So about 5 minutes really. It starts on page 203, goes to the first column of 204. Just take about 5 minutes to read it and think about how this might answer your questions about how to end a coaching cycle. Okay, so hopefully this gives you some ideas about what you can do at the end of a coaching cycle. Who could share something that really resonated with them or something they wish they had done at the end of the coaching cycle, something they do, maybe something in addition to what's written here, because there's a lot of other ideas. I'm looking for wildly waving hands. Oh, great. Leslie?
Typically, after a coaching cycle, it's kind of like a breather for the coach and the teacher. But I think it's nice to kind of do a gradual release of, the next couple weeks. We're going to expect that you'll continue this practice, and here are ways that I'm going to touch in with you and naming that, and also like scheduling out when you're going to do coaching activities, scheduling out, here's when I'll come back in and follow up and we can have conversation or I can observe. So just a gradual release was kind of like, oh, that makes sense. It's not just an abrupt end.
Okay, and that gets us to that point of making sure that what we've worked on is carried through. It's like follow-up for kids. When you're teaching something, then all of a sudden you move on to something else. You want to make sure they retain the skills you just taught.
Two things stuck out to me. The first was where it said the coach should be engaged in no more than 4 or 5 coaching cycles at a time. That was beneficial because I remember one of the questions was like, what's a typical amount of coaching cycles for the year? So it just kind of gave me an idea of like, okay, 4 or 5 at a time. But then the other thing was what kind of to piggyback off what you were saying, that gradual release. Like, you're going to keep teaching. We're going to touch base a couple more times. I'm not just leaving you totally in the dark, and I'm not in your face every day. So that nice little couple meetings, couple drop-ins, and then another reflection. So those were 2 ahas for me.
And so this does answer one, a question that 100 people have about how many coaching cycles can I do at a time? And I think that we can just take a minute here to talk about the fact that the answer is it depends, because it depends what the focus of your coaching cycle is. I think you first have to think about what times do I have free that the teacher who I'm working with is going to be teaching, and what times do we have for conferencing. So say you're going to work with somebody in small groups, instruction, you're probably going to want to be in that room almost every day for that whole cycle. So it's like, okay, from 9 to 10, every single day I'm going to be in that classroom. and twice a week we're going to meet from 3 to 3:30. Okay, that's blocked off. That's a big piece of work because you've got planning to do yourself as well for all the modeling and things. Maybe you've got somebody who needs a mini cycle, who just wants to focus in on a couple of things, and you think we could do this for 2 weeks. I could be in the room every other day, and we could do our planning before school. So you kind of really have to map it out. 4 to 5 is really taking on a lot of work. So if you're just starting, I'd say start with 1 or 2, and then as you know, you can build on at a third one or a third teacher at some point in time. So it also depends on what else you have to do. But I'd look carefully at those what else's you have to do if your school is ready for coaching cycles. But if you meet with every team every week, if you're kind of part of the grade level team meetings every week, and you have to block that time off, that takes a lot of time too. But it's very worthwhile if you have focused, intentional ideas for those grade level team meetings, if you're not just there to kind of be there. So you have to really consider what else you're doing. So I wouldn't say that this fall you're going to commit to doing 4 or 5 coaching cycles, but get started on 1 or 2 and then build it up. And as you see how long they take, and you might think a coaching cycle is going to take you 3 weeks, and it turns out you're adding on, so it's 6 weeks. Typically 4 to 6 weeks for an intensive coaching cycle is not unusual. Okay, so think about that when you get to the end. I think one of the things that is when you end that coaching cycle, you want to review with a teacher. Okay, wow, it's almost like the paraphrasing that was at the beginning of the coaching conversation that we did yesterday. Let's just review everything we did during this coaching cycle and see all the things we accomplished together. And using that we, and especially using the word you, so that teachers are affirmed on what they're doing, is really important. You did this, and you did this, and we did this together. I think that really just having a quick synopsis of what this coaching cycle looked like, what the teacher learned, what the students learned, and where you're going to go from there, I think is a really good way to end that coaching cycle and have a summarization, a synthesis, a conversation at the end. So that's just kind of a break off. Anybody have any further comments before we move on? We're happy to hear from the group. Because we have a whole set of questions over here that says, okay, you've talked to me about what it should look like, but what does it really look like in real life when you're in the school and all of a sudden life happens? So we've corralled a couple of people to talk about that. You're first. Oh, Asha's first.
Right. So as you all know, you've already stated that some of you are using different resources around coaching. And so it's good to hear from one another about the different types of resources you might be using, or just to hear what does coaching really look like in action within your district or, within your building. So we have 2 coaches that are going to just share a synopsis of what a typical coaching cycle might look like, whether it's mini or a full coaching cycle. But what does it look like from start to finish? And so I coursed, asked Erica to share. Erica Resch, she's from Hazel Park Schools, and she's an instructional coach there. So thank you for sharing.
Make sure you bow afterwards.
Oh, okay. No, I don't. I didn't. I want to point out it was 7:28 this morning. I was in line to get breakfast when I got the text. So there's literally no prep in my head. But I couldn't say no to Asha. Anyhow, so in my district, it's kind of twofold. I feel like I want to say maybe I've had 1 or 2 really full coaching cycles, some mini coaching cycles, and then some that I would call medium in between. one thing to note is a third to half of my staff is taught less than 5 years. So that gives me a lot of openings and a lot of teachers who are eager. And actually, I feel like coming out of school, they're understanding coaching and the value of a coach more. And last year, we got a new curricular resource, which really helped get into some of those coaching cycles. So small group, we made a transition from doing guided reading to all strategy group instruction for reading. So that's kind of the one I'm thinking about, is I have a young teacher who has texted me 4 times already this week because I'm not home, which is odd. But like I'm not at school either because that's not where I would be with her. But she's already got questions about like when can we start. So for her, a lot of it starts with just kind of, sometimes she doesn't even know what she's looking for. She'll say, I'm struggling with this. So for example, she goes, I don't understand how to do these small groups. I just learned how to do guided reading. Now we're switching. I don't understand it. So I kind of sit down. I have that conversation with her. And I have found, like I said, a lot of times she doesn't know exactly what or where she needs help. So rather than going right into planning with her or looking at data, I tend to do we look at the data a little bit. Sometimes she doesn't have the data that necessarily I would need to have that conversation. So I end up doing a lot of times the observation before the planning, so I can kind of give her some feedback and know where I kind of need to guide the conversation. Because when a teacher, in my opinion, isn't sure quite when they just say, I don't know how to do this, sometimes I can guide them into an area, and then once I watch them teach, I'm like, they had that. They didn't really need that from me. So I do that observation kind of part first, and then we'll meet again and talk about it, like what she thought went well, what I thought went well, that type of stuff. And then we have that planning conversation. So generally with me, though I know not everyone's into modeling, I will tend to go in and model for her because she's younger and she wants to kind of see how can it look, because it's that stumbling block of getting over how it's looking and how it can actually look when she thinks it won't work in her classroom. And then she'll go on and teach the same lesson, or the same concept, and I'll observe, and then there's a lot of co-teaching in there with her. So when you were talking about that every day, at first I'm like, well, that's crazy. That's every day for 3 weeks. But then when I look back, that's exactly what I did with her. Every day from 10 to 11:30, I was with her in her classroom, just co-teaching along with her till she got that confidence. And then we had that opportunity to meet again, talk about how it was going, and then she would say, well, this is working really good, but for example, I'm doing really good on my small groups, but the rest of the kids out there, that's kind of crazy. If you're not in there, that's not going to work. So that naturally lends itself to the next cycle. So I think that's kind of in a nutshell how it happens, and that I can think of 2 or 3 teachers that the same thing has happened with. And that's kind of how it works for us. Is that good? Thank you.
Take a bow, Erica. Thank you for sharing.
And I think especially with small group, what you said is so true. You have to say to teachers, okay, we're going to focus on your instruction during small group. If there's chaos back here, or not chaos, but if students aren't doing exactly what you hope they're doing, you're going to let that go right now. Because right now, you just want to hone in on these small groups. But we're not going to forget about what is going on around, because that's valuable time, as Nell Duke often tells us. Then our next coaching cycle is, okay, you got this down now. How can we make sure that we're making valuable use of all that time with other people? So, it's like narrowing that focus to what exactly is needed. And those of you who are familiar with Jim Knight's impact cycle, he's highly recommending that you videotape before you set your goals. And, some teachers are hesitant, but maybe they'd be less hesitant if you just said, I need to see what's happening before we set goals. I don't know your students like you do. I need to get at least a little input. And I think, as Erica said, sometimes with newer teachers, not your first year teachers are like, they're survival mode. Like, what am I doing tomorrow? Not, So oftentimes I tell coaches, if they're in a school district with a fairly good mentoring program, an outside mentoring program, this is not where you should spend your time, because, they have so many things, and they just need a little time to get from day to day. I remember when I was teaching, I was planned out that first day so well, and at 3:30 came, it's like, I have to come back tomorrow and do something. Okay, so I just think narrowing that focus and working with some teachers you might get better bang for your buck working with some teachers who have some who are ready for a little bit more in-depth look at their teaching, and that's not usually first. I'm not saying you can't help first-year teachers, but I'm not saying that I think the help may not be in the form of coaching cycles. So. Thank you, Erica, for sharing with us.
And I also voluntold. No, I'm really excited to have this person share, but I'm going to introduce Erin Bowen. She's from Three Rivers and from St. Joseph County ISD, and she's an instructional specialist. So when I asked her, she's like, so what do you want me exactly to share? Like, just give us one example of a successful coaching cycle from start to finish. So she's going to share a lot of great things that she did with that teacher. So thank you so much, Erin.
You're welcome. So she did give me a heads up, so I wrote stuff down just because, when you work with so many teachers, you don't remember all of the things. So I went back and looked last night. So similar to what you were saying, our district has different levels of coaching cycles. Some are just mini cycles where we're with a teacher for a week or two. Sometimes we go in depth for multiple weeks. And sometimes the teacher's just like, I have these ideas that are in my head and I just really want to sit down and go through them with somebody and make sure that I understand my own thinking. So we do some of that, guiding thinking as well. But this example is actually like a full coaching cycle that ended up going 6 weeks. My partner and I, there are two of us in our district, we spend a lot of time with professional learning communities. So this was a first grade team that was really focusing on small group instruction. So we were meeting and discussing data and student growth. And we identified a group of students that needed some additional support with phonics instruction. So the team discussed resources that were available, and they landed on the Walpole differentiated reading instruction. And the teacher who wanted to implement that was not familiar with the materials. And so that's kind of where I was asked to come in. So the first week, I really just went in and helped with assessments. And looking back, I wish that I had the teacher sit with me for at least a couple of them. But I did do the assessments, and then we met together to go over them. And we discovered that the groups of students needed to be split into two. So there was a group that was needing the CVC using letter sounds, and then another group that needed blends and digraphs support. So we did some co-planning around that. The teacher said, will you kind of walk me through the lessons? Let's take a look at them. And then we just made sure we gathered all of the materials. So we had that little co-planning. And since it's not a very broad topic, they're just 15-minute lessons, we were able to do that all in one session where we looked at the data and then got things together. So then the teacher said, I've never seen this before. I really need you to show me. So we planned for me to come in the first 2 days of implementation. So on the first day, I modeled both of the lesson types while the teacher just kind of read through the lesson script and just observed and listened and underlined and questioned things. And then we just met very briefly. It was not really like a meeting. It was just like, hey, this is the part I really want you to focus on tomorrow. Be a little more explicit with me. And then on day 2, the teacher observed using a feedback form that I actually got from Dr. Lallier and Annie Spear, where you will go through a lesson and you look for the timing and then what the teacher does, what the students do. And so I really had the teacher kind of give me the feedback on my lesson with that. So that was the second week. So the first week was the planning, the second week was the modeling. And then the teacher said, okay, so I'm ready to just try this. So on week 3, teacher went through, did it all themselves, and we had planned to meet. So then we were discussing, and I was like, okay, how's it going? Are you ready for me to come in and give you some feedback? No, totally fine, right? So then we did a little more co-planning, and the teacher identified for me the parts that they were comfortable with. And so we decided to do co-teaching. So they asked me to do the high frequency word part because that was something that felt a little unfamiliar to them, and they weren't really sure about the language and the counting the sounds and things. So then basically in that 4th week, we came and did some co-teaching and some more debriefing and co-planning. And then in week 5, the teacher's like, no, I've got this. I just want to do this myself. And then in week 6, they were ready for me to come back in, and I did the observation with the same feedback form that they did for me. And then after that, we just kind of did some of those check-ins, like, okay, when you get to the end of these units, the using letter sounds is just 15 lessons. So after basically 3 weeks, we did a check-in. the teacher was confident to do the assessments, and then we just kind of talked about it. And then with the blends and digraphs, they're like, I want you to help me with this assessment because it was a little more in depth. So then we did some side by side. Overall, like, this was probably one of the most complete cycles with a lot of the activities that were in there. But I was really happy because the teacher has always been a little reluctant to coaching, but they identified something that was really important to them and were able to invest the time in doing it. But it was also good learning for me because sometimes I think that my focus is too broad and then it doesn't feel as smooth. So I keep trying to keep that in the back of my head, like, okay, we can't do all of the things all at once. So what is this cycle going to be about?
Thank you for that great example, Erin, of, again, the start to the finish, the time, those coaching activities. What a great example to hear. IRL, that's kind of our little, in real life, right? This is theory, but in real life, what does that look like and sound like? So hopefully those few examples give you some other ideas as well for coaching cycles.
Can I ask a question from the virtual participants? Because it relates to in real life. Is this an okay opportunity?
Absolutely.
Okay, the question is, I had an issue this year that was that a teacher, their classroom management wasn't up to par, but the teacher didn't want to address it. The coach offered a couple of strategies and wanted to discuss them, and the teacher did not want, just said that they don't work. The teacher wanted to plan a lesson, but the kids were crawling under desks and not listening. Any thoughts or guidance that anyone can offer?
Thoughts from the field? I'm sure many of you have addressed this issue. How have you worked on that?
My name is Anna Atkins. I work, and I found last year that's what I was called in to do a lot of, was management. And I had one teacher where she's like, yeah, I am, and she's like, I just can't. And then I was like, okay, look, I'll go, let me model a lesson for you. What are you planning for this? And then I just took over. And I was like, what I want you to do is to see how I address the kids when they're doing something incorrect, whether they are getting up out of their seat or they're not following me. I'll go, and then when we met, I told her, these are the things that I did. I'll go, where we talked about, I'll go, what did you see me do first? That was the one thing with it. And she's like, oh, well, they just did it. I go, but why did they just do it? I was like, that was because I set expectations. I go, and that's where we need to start. And so then I tried to tell her, okay, before you do a lesson, think about what do you want them to do. And I tried to break it down for that teacher. And then I came back in. I go, I want you to try it. And then, or I can do it again. And then she's like, okay, I can do it. She goes like, yeah, I'm doing it. And I was like, okay. So we kept trying it. And I ended up stepping away, though, because there was another coach coming in as a language coach. And she's like, I want to focus on small groups now. I'm like, oh, you need to work. But it is difficult. But I tried to just model for them. This is what I did. And then explain. Whenever you're doing something, you have to set those expectations. And I tried to just tell her, like, explain that to her, and then I modeled it with her. And I was like, did you see? And then when we went over it, that was one thing we did, is we talked about, okay, what did I do? You know, we kind of broke it down for each lesson. But that's one thing I've noticed a lot of is management. And for last year is what I was for new teachers.
Yeah, I think we see it a lot, and I think some of your ideas are just spectacular in terms of, you know, what exactly did I do that allowed the lesson to progress the way we wanted it to progress, and what things could have I even done better. The other thing is, once you set those expectations for students, yes, you want to make sure students follow them, but on the other hand, we have teachers who stop every single minute they see a pair of eyes drifting. And so you lose everybody, right? So, we're setting the expectations. 90% of the kids are doing them, and we're moving forward, and then at later time, you can deal with those 2 or 3 students who, and if they're, if these 2 or 3 students are not bothering anyone else, I just say for right now, let them go and we'll deal with them. But, if they become a disturbance to the others, that's a different issue. But I do think that modeling is really important. And I also think that thinking about student engagement, what are you doing in your lesson to make sure the students are participating and engaged? Because that will keep them from doing things that you don't want them to do. Oftentimes they do those things because they have nothing to do but listen to you. And so I will stop and we'll move on. But hopefully that, is there anybody else has really good, that was a really good suggestion, a really good idea. We're going to have one more back here and then we'll move on.
I'm just really trying to think about the question posed from this coach too of, we all know, I think, being in the classroom, no instruction is going to take place until management is down. So I just kind of think putting it also back on students and having them take ownership. If the classroom is a little bit of chaos, having a classroom community meeting around like how are we feeling during the day in order to really hone in on specifics of what the expectations are. And I kind of was doing similar things last year with 3 newer teachers, and I love them dearly. And those are the supports that teachers need, and to be able to see their growth in that area. But we did a lot of work on having classroom community time around, guys, how do you feel our classroom is? So I think we have to start there. And I'm just really, I feel for that coach and just being with that teacher side by side and coaching into, it's a classroom community and starting there. I don't know if that answers that, but it's the expectations that need to be set, but in order to get there, kids have to own it too. So
helping students set those expectations, don't have them listed on the board when they walk in, but together we're going to build this community, and what do we want it to look like, and how can we get it there? And there's a lot of work on that, and in many schools right now. But that whole idea of why didn't we really enjoy our interactive read aloud lesson the way we should have? What was inhibiting us? What was stopping us from doing the kind of writing that we wanted to do today? Or what was helping us? The fact that everybody was, participating. So that's such a great idea. And we had one more.
I'm just going to share like another resource that when I was in the school, that like in some school buildings there are behavior specialists. So if you have a behavior specialist, it's like this, I'm working in this classroom, working with this teacher. It's probably the behavior specialist probably already aware of the behaviors in that classroom. So working together as a team, it's going to be very helpful because they have strategies that I wasn't aware that she was already trying to implement with that teacher. So I was there as a support with that teacher. So when I came in, I said, well, remember your behavior specialist recommended this. I'm going to try this recommendation this person gave. And they can see it working. And then that teacher was on board trying to do those strategies because she dismissed those strategies from the behavior specialist. And to see me doing the strategies that behavior specialist recommended, then that's all success with it.
Good idea. It just also reminds me that every teacher deserves a coach, but not every teacher needs 4 at the same time. Because in some school districts, there's a literacy coach, a math coach, a tech coach, a behavior coach. So, it's like, okay, what is my priority right now? I may need some work in literacy, but really, I need to work on or the language coach. Somebody was talking here about there's a language coach, some of your schools with multilingual learners. So just keep in mind that a teacher can only attend so many outside really good pieces of advice at one time. Okay, so that's kind of coaching in real life, and thank you for sharing something from the outside. I think we're going to start answering questions about, start addressing the questions about how do we document our coaching cycles and our coaching work, but so we're going to share a couple of things. Suzy, are you starting? No. Okay, so one of the things we're going to put into the resource folder is a couple of years ago when Suzy and I were talking about documentation, she shared at one of the meetings a paper and pencil documentation that she did of the coaching conversations and coaching cycles, where as they were conversing, she would fill out the document with the teacher right there. And Suzy's not sure where this particular document is, but I think it's really good if you're starting off to do paper and pencil and say, okay, this is our focus, and this is what we did today, and this is how you felt about it. We're writing it down. This is what our next steps are, and we each have a copy of this. And I'm not writing down anything that you're not seeing here. Is what she was trying to get across to the teacher. Like, this is our common reflective document on documenting what's going on in our coaching cycle. And it's nice to keep those together then, so that at the end you can say, okay, these were our next steps, we did them, that kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be digital. You might want to start off with paper and pencil, but I think we're going to hear about 2 digital versions today.
So in Oakland County, we currently use the Torch Talent platform, and this is where they document their coaching. We use a coaching log within that, and you'll see that there's different platforms. Suzy's going to share one today. And then every platform that we have doesn't always deliver every type of form that we might have, or every tool that might be needed in order for us to analyze our coaching. So I want to keep that in mind. This is not, it may not necessarily be, it's not a Torch commercial, but it's just a way for you to see how we are documenting our coaching and how we use that documentation to share back with others afterwards. So what our coaches did is, as they were documenting their coaching, and we recommend the frequency would probably be like maybe, once a week, or if they get into a habit of, logging every day, that might be more beneficial depending on how many coaching cycles you might have. But within their coaching log data form, there's a place for them to document the setting of the interaction, a little bit about the coaching cycle, what type of coaching cycle it might be, the grade level that they might be working with, what's their literacy focus. And when we say that, we're talking about one of the essential practices. Which essential practice are they focusing on for that time period? And then we also like them to think about what is their primary coaching stance when they're working with their teachers. So here's an example of a data form report. So after they've filled out these coaching logs regularly throughout their coaching cycles, then they're able to grab some data to kind of look and reflect on and analyze what their next steps might be. And they're able also to share back with their literacy leadership teams some of their coaching interactions, and they get that support from their literacy leadership teams to make decisions moving forward. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So Yep, I know. Yep. So within the setting of interactions that they have to choose from in their coaching log is it individual coaching, small group coaching, large group coaching. So that's that nested professional learning model we've talked about a lot within our coaching network, MDE coaching model. So you'll see that this example, 77% of their time is spent in individual interactions. They might have about 2% in small group coaching, about 3% large group. That's more than 10 teachers at a time. We also give them an opportunity to document their literacy leadership team time they might, because that's a part of our coaching essential number 7, I think it is. They're an integral member of their literacy leadership team, so they'll be reporting some things back to them. But some other things we have listed here, like classroom walkthroughs, principal coach meetings. And then we also decided about adding in non-coaching time, because at the start of the year last year, we were having, a lot of coaches having to wear different roles, and we just want them to be able to name it, because sometimes being able to name it and share that back with your team, those administrators can begin to protect your time better. So it's not like I got you, it's just kind of like, oh, well, I am kind of spending some time subbing, and that's just life, So we wanted to be able to name that. This is more towards the middle of the year, so we're not seeing as much as those, but we did see a couple of percentages initially. So being able to name the setting of the interaction, and then more specifically, the individual coaching activities. So if it was 77%, of my time in individual coaching activities, what was that individual coaching activity? Was it really a coaching cycle, or was it some random acts? We wanted them to be able to think about specifically, was it a mini coaching cycle, a coaching cycle, not a coaching cycle at all? And then there's some space there, like if it's not a coaching cycle, please explain what the activity may have been. Okay. Another piece that we hope to add this upcoming year would be specifically about that coaching cycle, which core activities are you engaging in, because that will give us a little more data about those coaching cycles. Okay. They're also able to look back and see, okay, how much time am I spending in third grade, first grade, second grade, so that grade level data, they're able to share back with their teams as well. They can get here's our literacy focus area. So if their building or their district has chosen, they have a literacy vision, literacy mission statement that is clearly explained to stakeholders at the onset of the year. We want to make sure that the data is lining up with that. So this one, 57% is small group coaching, small group instruction, which was their focus area. But you can see that sometimes there's other essentials that may overlap. But as you can see, that 25% is ongoing observation and assessment. So that ties right back into your small group instruction. So those two normally overlap because one feeds the other. Here's an example of the data around primary coaching stance. So you can see this coach, 80% of their time is spent as a collaborator. 16% of their time is spent consulting, so they may be offering more ideas in that within that coaching cycle. 3% of their time they're facilitating. But they get a chance to look at that, analyze it, and think about how they can balance out. And it really depends on what the teacher's goal is. And where the teachers are. So it may vary, depending on what you need to offer for them. Did I do that one already? Oh, I went the other way. So what we did is gave them a couple of questions to think about and reflect on in preparation for a meeting with their LLT teams. And so these were some of the possible questions. So think about, is most of your time spent in coaching cycles, full coaching cycles, mini coaching cycles? What does that look like? And be ready to speak a little bit about those. What's the setting of the interaction? How are you spending most of your time? Is it mostly individual? And maybe it starts out with large group coaching at the onset of the year, but then you're moving into those coaching cycles, more individual interactions. What percentage of your time is aligned to your literacy focus? What other focus areas are getting significant time? So we know that we see impact with student achievement when we are focusing in one specific area. At what school or building am I spending most of my time? I didn't put that up there because I didn't want to give away too much information. But you can also think about what grade level am I coaching most of my time around. And then think about what information is not reflected in the report but is important to share back with your team. And so these were some of the questions that as our literacy coaches met with their literacy leadership teams, that they asked their teams to reflect on. So what are the trends we're seeing that suggest we are moving in a productive manner? So they began to lift some of those trends. Maybe it was a lot of large group professional learning, and they weren't getting into the classrooms as much or doing as much individualized interactions. Keeping in mind that the literacy leadership teams are, they normally have a central office administrator. There might be other literacy coaches on that team. There might be a building principal on that team. So there's different levels of support that may be on that team that will help them to move through those coaching cycles or be able to get into their coaching cycles in a more productive way. What trends in your data are different from what you had expected or hoped for? And then what changes could our LLT make that will enhance our coaching system, resulting in more effective coaching? So after our literacy coaches started having these conversations, or after we gave them the support around asking some of these questions and meeting with their LLT teams maybe quarterly, we got feedback from our coaches about what kind of shifts took place after they had these meetings, and shared the results of like their coaching cycles. One particular I want to lift says admin will address K2 staff during staff meetings about coaching cycles, as well as individually in mid-year meetings. We have one down here. We're creating a clear communication plan for coaches and teachers so that everyone understands what a coaching cycle is. So back to what we said yesterday, does all stakeholders, teachers, coaches, principals understand what a coaching cycle should look like? So that was a powerhouse. We've launched instructional cycles with all first and second grade teachers. So these were comments from one of our coaching network sessions where we just kind of asked them, put on a sticky note, how has things shifted since you've met with your LLT teams and shared your coaching log data or your coaching cycle data? And those were some of the responses. We actually shared some of these responses with our board. They were really excited to hear that there's movement and there's things that are happening when coaching is really implemented. So we just wanted to share that process, the power of documenting your coaching log. We're going to be making some changes this year to Torch, within Torch, with our, or we may or may not keep the same platform, but for now, just being able to make sure that we have those coaching logs, they're logging on a regular basis, and then they're using it to reflect and go deeper with their coaching cycles. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so also on Torch, you can add in your goals. So you can set a goal for yourself, and you can set timelines, so like dates that you want to achieve certain parts of your goals. So if I am doing a mini coaching cycle, I would set a date for when I'm going to have my goal setting meeting with a teacher, a date for when I am going to accomplish maybe some research that I feel like I need to do around a certain essential or a certain module online. And then I set goals for myself personally too. So like I want to, I guess, learn more about one of the coaching essentials. Well, I'm going to set a goal that I'm going to watch over this module by this date, and set. Then you can kind of check off as you're going through the goals. and say like, I've accomplished this. I love checklists, so I like checking off like, okay, I've done that, to be able to accomplish that goal. And then it can go back to you guys as well, and you guys can see what goals we've achieved and where we're at.
So that's like having project management really is what it is from business. That's great. I wanted to go back here because you said we're going to work with all first and second grade teachers. And it really said first and second year teachers, and I prefer what you said. I prefer what Asha said, because if a district decides to work with all first and second year teachers, then it's like, well, that's who needs coaching. You know, fifth and sixth year teachers using a new curricular resource, they don't need any coaching. They can just do it on their own. And so I really think you have to really think carefully about targeting, as I mentioned before, even new teachers, but targeting certain levels of teachers, thinking that others don't need it. I also think that rather than focus on the teachers, focus on the students. Where are the needs of the students? You know, every second grade, and we see this often, second grade students have real gaps. And how are we, regardless of how many years of experience we've had as a second grade teacher, those second grade students are not doing well. And so what is it about the curriculum, about the instruction that's happening that is interfering with second graders really making good progress? So focus on the students rather than on the teachers, and you might be able to then include more of the teachers who could benefit from coaching, or you know, who really have some great ideas, but they need someone to talk them through and work them through. So just a little comment. I think this whole process is wonderful, especially the idea of really analyzing what you're doing and making some decisions based on that. So that's great.
All right, I'll go ahead and take that. Thank you, Asha. And I'm going to go ahead and talk next about another digital platform, but it's also weird because we're just piloting it this year. But what do we get? We get our best ideas from other people, right? And so I work with a technology coach in one of my districts, and she shared with me about Connect Hub, and she said it was made by a coach for coaches. There's free and there's a paid, but even the paid version was very like $100 for the year. So like when we think about like the grand scheme of things, you could start with a free account and just to kind of dabble in. So I'm going to showcase her. I reached out to her, and so she has some data that she has shared with me that I'm going to go over just to kind of show you, you know, what is the difference, what does Connect Hub show? You'll see a lot of similarities with what Asha just shared, and there might be some differences too. So John, if you could just click on the Connect Hub overview. And he's going to graciously scroll for me. And as he zooms in, thank you. Okay. So, and again, this is weird talking to you about something I haven't actually done myself, but I look forward to having our quarterly sessions. Maybe I can give you updates or bring some different data for you just to show you how my data is progressing, especially through the new use of this platform of Connect Hub. But the first thing you can do is logging interactions. Now, again, this is a technology coach, so we are going to be meeting as a coaching team to see what are those interactions we're going to want to make sure we have put in there. So that's what's great. You can go ahead and tag those interactions. Thank you. And then there's duration. So again, when Susan's talking about amount of time, that was one thing we really appreciated. It's going to log all of that time for us. You can easily create groups and pin educators being coached. And so I already started making my groups, my 3 schools. So if I do a whole group PD, I can just tag that whole school and it goes to each of their individual spots as well. So I think that's really great that I can be more efficient with my documentation by creating groups, especially if you have large group or small group professional learning or grade level meetings. We can view information on coaching cycles. Again, you can customize. I really love there's a spot for growth as well. You can keep scrolling for me, John. Thank you. some different data on the interactions. You can see the educators' engagement, hours. Now again, she's got a lot of buildings in one district, so this is the amount of interaction she's done, so she can see and reflect on, okay, I'm spending a lot of my time at Sturgis High School, but I haven't so much at Congress. So maybe as I'm planning out my next 6 weeks, I can really think about those other buildings. So it can kind of show you a glimpse, if you have multiple buildings, how you're utilizing and spending your time. There's the total interactions by type. So again, she had coaching cycle, principal meetings, and again, you'll see some things that might be different for tech, but we look forward to thinking about what interactions do we want to put in there to customize it and to really help us reflect and analyze. So here she can kind of see like a visual to say, how am I spending my time this day of this week? You know, and kind of, I know Dr. Lallier has like a pie chart that kind of allows us to think, okay, was this more around my professional learning? Was it around coaching? And even planning for coaching. So it kind of shows you at just a visual glance how you might have spent your time during that week. Here I really like too, you can tell she did a lot with eSpark because it's the biggest, but she can kind of see again in a view what are the different coaching goals and focuses across the buildings. And then this right here was one of my favorite things, the coaching cycle data. So here she has how many total cycles she has. You can go and you can drill down and say how many hours within that coaching cycle. And then here the impact of the coaching cycles. And so she has it around instructional technology, professional growth, differentiation. Now again, without knowing, I can't really speak so much, but I believe we can go ahead and put a goal. We can go ahead and put a goal in, and we can put a measurement, and then we can show that pre and that post. So then we can really highlight the impact of the coaching cycle as well. And so I am really excited. Every year I feel like I do something different for documentation to try to get better, more efficient, more effective. And I really hope that this tool will be able to help us really reflect and analyze on our coaching. And when I'm able to meet with coaches in the county, thinking about, so what does that mean next? What's a goal you might have for your next set of coaching cycles? And so I'm really excited to share with you as the year progresses my knowledge around this documentation tool. And I really love, again, that it's made by a coach for coaches, and it's cheap. You know, like there's a lot of great things about it, but we want to make sure it also fits our purpose too. So I look forward to updating you and sharing with you around Connect Hub. I just linked to, if you go back, John, to the slideshow, I just put the website right there if you want to find out more information. But thank you for letting me share about a tool that I don't know a whole lot about yet, but I really look forward to sharing with you all as data progresses and those coaching cycles progress throughout the year.
Thanks, Suzy. I think that you can see that there's some similarities, but there's quite a bit of difference too. So when you're looking for documentation, you want to really think about what fits our coaching team's style and what gives us the information we need. But you have data then to make further decisions about what you're doing in coaching. And I think that one of the questions that came up was, do all coaching cycles need to have data? I think all coaching cycles need to have data because I'm very interested in the relationship between coaching and student achievement. But I will say this, you're going to have some coaching cycles where the data is teacher growth, not student growth. So, for example, if you're starting off on something brand new and you're doing a lot of professional learning with the teacher, and the teacher, I think this comes from Muskegon, that the teacher really didn't know much about writing instruction and was very had a lot of efficacy doubts about the ability to be a good writing instructor of the students. And so that first coaching cycle was all about the coach modeling the different steps of instruction, of writing instruction for the teacher, and having the teacher reflect on what the teacher was seeing the coach do, and just feeling comfortable with writing processes, writing strategies. And so there was data from the teacher that the teacher wanted to know. What did the teacher want to know more about? And at the end, it was, do I have the knowledge I need now to go on and do a coaching cycle with you where the focus is student data, how the students are performing. But during that time when they were working on, just the intricacies of writing processes and strategies, the coach did not also say, oh, and let's collect some data about the students while we're doing that. Because let us have the focus on teacher learning. So that's teacher data. And I think there's a lot of room for small group instruction is another way. When you're first doing it, you're not going to collect student data every day necessarily. Unless you're doing something like DRI, you can go ahead and collect that student data, because typically when people are doing the Walpole directed reading instruction, students do very well. 80% of the students do it. It's very explicit. It's at their level. They move along. The progress monitoring shows really good growth, and teachers and students are pleased. And so then I think you can collect student data while teachers are learning that process. But with some of these more intricate things that teachers have a lot of self-doubt about, do a teacher-focused coaching cycle first, and then move it into student.
So our literacy leadership team decided that our focus last year as a team was going to be small group instruction. So what I did is we had monthly PLC or grade level team meetings that I had with my curriculum director / assistant principal. We ran those together and we planned those together. And I would run like professional learning based on what I thought the teachers needed, whether it was looking at Essential 3 and like talking with our larger LLT and what is it that might be confusing in verbiage to the teachers, and what can I like I guess talk to about that. Also anecdotal note taking. What does that look like? What can teachers do? So we did a lot of talking and learning about that. But before the very beginning, I did a Google form where I did like a range of like 1 to 5, and it was anonymous. But I did kind of gather a little like, are you K1? Are you 2-3? So I had a little information about the teachers. I just wanted them to be honest, and I know that can be really hard. So I did one before school started. I did one in late October. I did one in January, and that was a way for me to collect data on the teachers of how prepared do you feel for small group instruction? Do you feel confident in doing the benchmark assessments or progress monitoring? How do you feel about collecting anecdotal notes and different things like that? So I could see, okay, it looks like 80% of these teachers are really struggling or don't feel confident in this area. I can coach into that. And then from there, I was able to get into classrooms a little more and figure out, observe a bit and figure out where I could support the teachers best. And then we could get into coaching cycles from there. But as a whole, I was able to collect some adult teacher data by doing it that way and creating a Google form anonymously to collect some of that information to have data.
And so not forgetting that professional learning is a critical part of coaching cycles, either doing it during a coaching cycle, prior to a coaching cycle, ongoing, however you do it. But professional learning is part of that coaching cycle. And as we kind of narrow down now, I think you have it. We want to just end by having you think about these things. And when we talk about mini cycles, we're not trying to downplay the importance of mini cycles. Mini cycles can be really important, especially if a teacher's, rolling along and they just have this one little area that they want to focus on for a couple of weeks, and they need some support in that area. I call that kind of a mini cycle. You can call it a coaching cycle based on teacher need. Maybe we should call them coaching cycles, but I just think that sometimes they're short and focused and based on teacher need or student need, and so that's what I term a mini cycle. But I do not in any way think that you shouldn't be doing mini cycles. if it fits the purpose of what you should be doing. So if you look at your No More Random Acts of Coaching piece, comes from chapter 3 on page 65. There are some ideas about if you're new to school coaching cycles. So if that's you, and you might want to read 65 to 68. If you have been in some coaching cycles and you want to kind of make them deeper, let's read pages 69 and 70. And gosh only knows what PG cycles are, but not enough sleep. So cycles around school-wide goals. If you're at that stage where you're really wanting to focus on cycles around school-wide goals, read pages 70, 71. And then I think the table on 73 is really good because it talks about how you can move from the kind of coaching you're doing not as focused into more intentional coaching. So we want to just give you that idea because when we're finished, when you're finished reading that, we want you to think about where, maybe you're reading one of these, but now you're thinking, I'm really more at another level. But we're going to ask you all to say kind of which of these levels you think you might be at so that when we meet in October, we might do breakout sessions according to which of these best fits. So read the one that seems to fit you the best and just take a gander at page 73, and then we will finish up with some reflection. Okay, so we have just a short time before you can go take a break and then be joining about some more information about the updates to the essentials. But what I'd like you to do is take a sticky note, put your name, your ISD on it, and which of these categories do you think you fit into? Or if you want to create your own category, live it up. So are you going to kind of, and it could be that you're new to school coaching cycles. It could be that you might be a second year coach in that school, but you really didn't do much in terms of coaching cycles the first year. So you might be new to school. If you have been doing some coaching cycles and you want to really focus in on strengthening them, you might be in the deeper coaching cycles. Or if you know, I'm doing like this this one school that Asha was talking about, they knew they were going to work on small group instruction. So everybody was going to work on that around school-wide goals. So pick whichever one and write it down on your sheet. Right now, this is where I think I am. It doesn't have to be perfect. Or if there's some other category, this is where researchers, always put other, and then you have to go through and figure out what does that mean. But I'm inviting you to add an other if you want to. The other thing that we would like you to do, there's a 2-question a 2-question reflection. It's not this one. But there is a 2-question reflection on your resource page, right? On the agenda. Is that where it is, Melissa?
Yes, it's linked on the resource page, and that's on the landing page for the breakouts. If anyone needs help, I can come around.
That would be great. So there are really 2 questions. Something about what are 2 big ideas that really resonated with you during our sessions, which we are so grateful that you came to and participated in really well and felt like a nice community of practice is being started here. And the second question is, are there specific things that you want us to talk about at the October meeting in addition to having some breakout sessions? So we'll have probably about an hour and a half at that in the October meeting to meet as a group, and so that would be good to know that we're meeting your needs in terms of more information or more things to think about. So if when you have your sticky note, you're putting them. Okay. So if you just add them to the chart that fits you most, and if you do your reflection for us, that would be great. And 2 minutes, and you can go to break, or whenever you feel like. But we really would like you to fill out the form, you know, as soon as possible, so it's fresh in your mind, and so we have something to build on. But I want to give you all a round of applause, because you all really, we appreciate your coming. And I'm so looking forward to seeing how coaching cycles progress when we have such a big group of people working together on that topic.